Okay, so we're going to get started today, which is really kind of an extension of what we did last class, which will be continuation next class. Essentially, we're still working on creating our 2D line drawings from our 3D Rhino file. Last class, we did the elevation view, so I walked you through the steps required to do the elevation view. Elevations are the simplest of the bunch because generally they don't require any section to be cut. For plans and for sections, which are the next two that we're going to do. We'll do that today. We're going to do a plan. On Monday, we're going to do a section. They both require a section cut, which adds to the complexity of what we're trying to do. So really, today and Monday are kind of repeats. We're just doing a different plane. But it does take a little bit more work to do that than it did for the elevation view. So the elevation view tends to be the simpler one, and that's why I start with that particular view. In terms of how the semester plays out, today we'll do a plan, on Monday we'll do a section, and then on Wednesday I'm going to do some Photoshop work with something called the Z-depth channel, which controls kind of how the view looks after the fact. And I want to walk you through that because it's a great, powerful tool for tweaking your renderings at the end and really enhancing them just a little bit. So not too much involved in that, so mostly you'll have a working day, but I will talk a little bit about Photoshop, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the other things that we might do in terms of collaging in elements, etc. So let's start right into our plans from Rhino. I have my master site file open. I've been bouncing back and forth between the Tahoe version and the Coast version. Today I'm in the Coast version, but again, it's the same file, so it really doesn't matter too much. And so when I go ahead and I start to create that plan version, first thing I want to do is do a save as. So I take my master site file, and I'm going to go to File and then Save As. There's a reason I'm doing this in front of you, because I want to emphasize the Save As, because I'm ultimately going to be destroying parts of this model. So this is a fork, a hard fork, so to speak. So this is going to be the master site. This is Plan, View. And I'll go ahead and click Save. And I now have that saved. So some of this is a repeat of what we did back when we did the section cut, when we did the sectional perspective. I'm going to work kind of in a same manner here, and I'm going to work to create that plan view. I'm not overly concerned about, in this case, I have the ocean, because it's not going to affect the plan view at all. I'm going to be much narrower than just this, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the ocean. I have a layer for the ocean somewhere. There it is. I should be able to turn it right off, and then I don't have to worry about that anymore either. I also appear to have my texture mapping on for the terrain, so let me hide the mapping because we don't need that mapping widget showing either. If you were working on the Tahoe file, same thing. Hide the rest of the Tahoe block because you really don't need it to create the plan. It'll just save us a little bit of work. So let me go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to call that new layer Plan View, for lack of a better term. And as a sublayer for Plan View, I'm going to call a Plan Rectangle, or Surface. Let's make that Plan Surface layer current, and I'm going to draw a rectangle or a rectangular surface that is larger than everything that's in my scene right now. So we did this with a vertical plane when we cut the section. This is just happens to be horizontal. There it is. I now need this plane to go through my building at the proper location. And so this is a little bit dependent on your building. So let me zoom selected here. And in my case, I really have kind of 3 floors of the building. There's 3 rooms, and they're stacked as you go up the hillside there. So if I cut through this room, I'll be able to cut through and see this room as well. So it's a little bit unconventional. Usually you pick 4 feet above wherever the floor plane is, and that's where you cut it. But since this has multiple floors, I want to make sure that I'm cutting it appropriately. Alternatively, I could cut it at the top here and cut through the top of this room, one way or the other. So I can do it in a less precise manner by just moving this plane, V for vertical, and I can just move this plane up to the point at which it's cutting through my building at the appropriate place. So this would be if I wanted the 2nd floor. This would be if I wanted the 1st floor. Again, it doesn't really matter which one that I'm going to do. So I'll leave it there. So that plane then represents what it is that I'm going to be cutting through, just like the section view would be. Okay, so I'd like to temporarily see that plan view and make sure that I like what I see. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Section Tools view. So I can type in ST-View to create this, or excuse me, ST-Create to create this section plane. Or I could go ahead and go to the Section Tools menu here and choose Create. Select Objects to Section. I'm going to type All and press Enter, and then I'm going to hold down the Control key and deselect that big surface because I don't need that one. And I'll go ahead and press Enter. So now when we start thinking about options here, this gets a little bit tricky because we've been doing it in the x-axis or the y-axis in the vertical plane. I need to create it so that it's pointing down. So I'm actually going to work in one of my other views. So if I was in the front view here, I would want it to be in the x-axis. So I'm going to leave it set as x-axis, but I'm not doing it in the rendered views. I'm doing it down here in the front view. Let me come over here. We're going to do solid mode set to surfaces. And the rest of this should all be fine. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. Now when I place my section, notice that instead of working in one of the two rendered views, I'm working in the front view here. I'm going to turn on my object snap and turn on center snap, I hope. Still thinking. I'm going to turn on center snap so that I can snap to the center of that rectangle. My arrows are pointing down, which is the direction that I want them to point. Perfect. I've placed my section, and I'll go ahead and press Enter. That then creates my section. If I turn off my, let me make plan view active here. There we go. Let me turn off my big rectangle, and I'll work in this render view for right now. Actually, let me switch it over into just the plain perspective. There's set view and then perspective. There we go. I can view the section right here by typing ST-View, or I can go up to my Section Tools command here and choose View. Select sections. I'm going to click on List here, and I'm going to pick ST00, which is the only section that I have. That's my plan view. And select the viewport that I want to enable it in. It's going to be in perspective. And so now I can temporarily see, oh, OK, there's my plan view. That's what I cut through. And that looks reasonable for what I'm after. In this particular view, we can see that some of my walls did not fill in. So I'm going to take some time and fill in those walls before we get too far along here. In my plan view, I'm going to create another sublayer, and we'll call this Plan Fill. I'll make that the active layer, and I'll use my Surfaces tools. And I need to turn on my endpoint. Might end up needing my midpoint there as well. Let me do it on the inside here because it's not snapping. Turn on perpendicular snap. There's my first surface. I can now zoom selected, and that'll make navigating this a little bit easier. So bear with me. This would be a surface from 3 or 4 corner points because I have a little taper in the wall right there. This one needs to be a surface from 3 or 4 corner points, I think, because of the precision. There, 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 and there. Last one. is right there. Oh, two more. Sorry, I missed two. All right, so I believe I got them all now. That just filled in my walls for me. So now I want to see this looking down on this particular view. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my perspective view and go to Set View and then Top so that I'm looking down on my object. This will let me position it the way that I want so that I'm seeing the whole floor plan looking down on it. So maybe it's about like that or so. Looks pretty reasonable. Now, one of the things I noticed in the elevation views that several of you did last class was you didn't save the view. You went to your left view or your front view, but you didn't actually save the view. Before you do this, make sure to save the view, because then you can go back and much easier, it will be much easier to create the rendering afterward. So I'm going to make sure I save this view. Instead of Top, I'll go to Set View and then Named Views. I'm going to click the little Save As icon here, and this is my floor plan. And I'll go ahead and say OK. So I now have this view saved as my floor plan view. In the floor plan view, I want to show my camera. So I'll go to Set Camera and then Show Camera. It looked like it was already on, so we'll go back and make sure that it is on. There it is. And now I can look in one of my other views. I'll work in this Render 2 view, but let me change it to shaded mode. And there's the camera looking down on my object, or down on my building. There it is. Let me switch this actually into wireframe so I can see my points a little bit better. And I need to draw that same viewport rectangle that I did last class. So I'm going to go into the rectangles here, and I'm going to choose this rectangle with 3 points. I'm going to turn on my point snap. There it is. And there's my first 2 points, and there's my last point right there. That rectangle is 1/4 of the overall view. I can then scale it from this upper corner by 2 to get the whole size of the view. If I jump over and look back at my floor plan view, we can see just a faint outline of that going around the outside of my border. That's exactly what we're after. Perfect. So I have my view. I have my viewport rectangle established. The next thing that I need to consider is, do I want topo lines to appear as part of this plan? Remember, I did that with the last class as part of my elevation, so it may be something that I want to recreate here as well. So if I want that to be the case, I'm going to go ahead and work in this render view over here. If I had the section showing here, I'd ST clear all views, but I don't, so I'm not going to worry about it. And I can cut my section. Let me go ahead and give, under Plan View here, I'll create another sublayer. We'll call this Contours, or better yet, Topo Lines. I'm going to contour this surface. I'll go up to Curve, Curve from Objects, Contour. Base point would be that corner. Direction perpendicular to the contour planes. Remember, this is going straight up in the Z direction. There it is. And my distance, I did 5 feet last time. We'll do 5 feet again. Should work out. I hope. There we go. I should have contoured this little tiny surface there as well. Let me undo that for a second. I'll do it one more time. It's going to be this and this that we're going to contour. There's my base point. It's going vertical. We're going to do it at 5 feet. And this time the contour should continue across right there. There we go. Perfect. So I created those contours. Now, it's a little bit tricky here because in my floor plan view, when we do the Make 2D, you can see here that I'm looking into my building, which is great. This is perfect for the Make 2D, but I'm missing the upper part of the topo here and the upper part of those topo lines. So I may end up doing two Make 2Ds out of this view, one where I have the rest of the topo lines, and I'll show you how I'm going to go about doing that. So let's start with the first Make 2D option. I'm going to hit Escape twice so that nothing's selected. I'm going to go ahead and type Make 2D, which is the same command we used last class. Select objects to draw. It's going to be all. I'll go ahead and press Enter. That selects everything that's available to me right now. But I want to deselect the topo lines. So I'm going to hold down the Control key and then right-click and say Select Objects. Now you know what? I'm just going to turn the topo lines off instead. Oh no. I had my layers wrong. Turn those off. There we go. So that I can just turn those topo lines off. OK, so we'll go ahead and press Enter. Hold on, I think I lost my rectangle too. Darn it. I did. All right, so let me try that one more time. Make 2D. All except for, no, it's my plan failed. See, I made a mistake when I did the contours because I did not, let me just do the contours again. I didn't have them on their correct layer. All right, one more time. Apologize for this. Contour. Base point in that corner, straight up and down at 5 feet. They'll be on the correct layer this time. Perfect. We make the floor plan big here. I'm going to hit Escape twice so that nothing's selected. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the topo lines. Perfect. Now I can type in, let me turn on my plan fills. Here we go. Do I have two sets of topo lines? It's going to drive me nuts today. Can't do it right. Good. All right. So let me go back to Set View. There's my floor plan view. All right. Make 2D. Try this for the third time. All. Did it include my rectangle, or did I manage to get rid of that rectangle too? God, I just can't do things right today. There it is. Deselect that. There we go. Now those can delete. One more time. Make 2D. All. There we go. Now I'll do it correctly. So this is going to be of the current view, which is the floor plan. I'm going to show my hidden lines and maintain my source layers to make my Illustrator export work a little bit better. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And it's going to build my Make 2D for me. Perfect. Now remember, it's going to show up in the top view. The floor plan view happens to be like the top view, but I'm going to go ahead and show the top view down here just to keep them separate. Let me go back to the top view, and there is my floor plan that I was looking for. So that's good. I'm going to trim off. Let me make this big for a second. I'll trim off the stuff that I don't need. Let me go ahead and type trim, and we can get rid of that and that. And then this is all that I need. So let me move it from this corner to 0, 0, 0. And then I can get rid of all the rest of this because this stuff just doesn't matter. Like that. So I said that I was going to treat the contours a little bit differently. I'm going to do a make 2D of just the contours so that I get all the contours. And I'll show you that in just a second. Let me go back to my floor plan view because I accidentally zoomed in here. Let me turn on my topo lines, but I'm going to type ST clear all views so that I get everything, including the upper set of contour lines. And so now I'm going to make 2D. I'm going to type in, make 2D. I have my rectangle on the plan fill layer, I believe. Let me double check that I have that. No, I don't. All right. What layer is that rectangle on? Should have paid more attention. It is on layer 2. Perfect. OK, so back to floor plan here. I'm going to make 2D. And I'm going to do that by selecting the layer with the rectangle. So let me select the objects. There's my viewport rectangle. And I'm also going to select the topo lines. Select objects. And that's it. So I'm just doing a second make 2D with just these objects. I'll press enter. Same options here. I'll go ahead and say OK. This one won't take very long. There it is. I'm going to look at it in the top view. And there is my viewport boundary and all the extra pieces that I don't need. I'll type in trim, and I'll get rid of the parts that I don't need. Like that. Once I'm done, I'll press enter. And then I can take this, minus the boundary, because I don't need that. I already have it. And I can move that to 0, 0, 0, which is going to give me all those line drawings that I need. I'm going to select, there they are. I knew they were here somewhere. Sometimes it's hard to see it when it's on top of everything else. So it is here. I'm going to go ahead and select it by choosing to select sublayer objects for the make 2D. That way I can select everything. I don't need all the rest of this stuff, so I'm going to hold down Control and make sure I deselect that. And all I have is the drawing itself, and it's at 0, 0, 0. So that's ready for the export to Illustrator. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Export Selected. And this is where we're going to change to Adobe Illustrator as our export options here. I'm going to go into my flash drive and go to today's folder. Create a new folder for spring of 2019. There we go. And this is my floor plan. In my options, remember we're going to keep it at scale. So I'm going to preserve the model scale. 1/4 inch equals a foot would be 48 inches is equal to 1 inch. The rest of these options are fine. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. These options are also fine. I'll say OK. And let's go have a look at that to see how it turned out. There's my floor plan 1. Let's go ahead and open that up in Illustrator. It's important here that I'm working in Illustrator because I'm maintaining that scale. I was specific about my export to make sure that I was at scale, and that's going to keep this at scale long term. So I need to adjust the size of my artboard to match my drawing here. I'm going to use the artboard tool. It's available right here. And I'm going to adjust it so that it snaps to the edges of my drawing. Once I've done that, it's always useful to zoom in a bit. I'll press Control+ a few times and make sure it actually lines up, because sometimes it doesn't quite line up. That looks pretty good. I'm holding down spacebar while I pan. All right, looks good. I'll go ahead and go back to my regular selection tool. Let me press Control-0, and now we're seeing the whole plan. So just like last time, it always takes a little bit of work to go through and make sure that you're modifying pieces and that they look the way that they're supposed to be and correct the errors and that sort of thing. First thing I'll do is look at my layers, which is a giant mess. I'm going to organize that by creating 2 master layers. First layer is going to be called Visible. Second layer will be called hidden. Visible should be on top of the hidden layer. There it is. And I'll go through and I'll select all of the objects or all the layers that are visible. So I'm going to hold down Control so that I can select multiple. And I'm just looking right here for the word visible as I go through. Remember, if you're not that comfortable in Illustrator and you would instead like to export them, you can do just the two, one layer for visible, one layer for hidden. It just doesn't give you quite as fine a control with line weights after the fact. There's all my visible layers. I'm going to put them up onto this visible layer there, which is going to leave me with all of my hidden layers, and those are all going to go on the hidden layer there as well. So I have them set up like that. Let's start first with the topo lines. I'll go ahead and select all of those. There we go. Let me hold down Shift to make sure I've selected those there. I do not want that section cut line. Whoops, sorry. I held down Control by habit instead of Shift. In Illustrator, you have to hold down Shift. All right, I got them all except for that purple line. Oh, I need this one. There you go. There are all of my topo lines. I'm going to go into my properties here, and under my stroke weight, I'll set that at maybe 0.5. I want to make those dashed lines, so I'll go ahead and go to Window, and then Stroke. And then I need to show my options, and that'll let me use a dashed line. We'll do a dashed line of maybe 6 point and 6 point. There we go. And my color, I'm going to set that color to be kind of a medium gray, something about like that. And that should change all of those lines to be dashed. You guys probably can't even see them, can you? Let me go to Select, Same Stroke Weight. That will select them all again, and I'll make them a little bit darker. I'll make them black so that you guys can see them, though in reality I would end up probably doing them not black. Well, you can see them just faintly. They're there. Then I need to go through and modify other pieces of this, and I'm not going to spend too much time today going through and making those modifications. There you go. Now you can see the dotted lines a little bit better. So we're working primarily right now with the visible layer, not the hidden. So I'll go ahead and turn the hidden off because it's not going to do too much for me. And this is where I need to adjust the line weights of the building itself. I also might need to do some cleanup work. So this first line here, I might make that 2 points or maybe 3 points depending on the thickness. But I also need the color of that not to be purple. So I'll change that over to black. And suddenly that one looks a whole lot better. The alternative would be to come over here and select all of the wall layers, which I should be able to select by clicking here, and then adjusting them all at once. So I can make them all black, and I can make them all at 0.3. Go ahead and type in 3 point. There it is. And somehow they all became white instead. Let's try making them black so that maybe you can see them. There we go. So the way I had it set up, I had exterior walls and I had interior walls. So my interior walls are right here. I can select all of my interior walls. Same thing. There's 3 points. I don't want them to be red. I want them to be black, like that. So you see how I'm starting to build out this. As I zoom in, there's always corrections to be made. So this, for example, is a little piece that doesn't need to be there. We can get rid of that piece and that piece. Likewise, this line here should be the same thickness as that. I can use the eyedropper tool right here to match that thickness. Same thing, I could take all of these lines I'm holding down Shift as I select them, and I could use the eyedropper tool to match that. So that makes it a little bit easier. These lines in here, I can probably just delete those because they're not really important. This one ends up needing to be a little bit shorter, so I can shorten that up. I can take this line and shorten that one up. That line goes away. That line goes away. That line there goes away. There's a little tiny red line here that should match the thickness of that, like that. That line should go away. This red line here should match the stairs, so I can come back and match that line. So it takes a little bit of working and some finesse to get through it, but once you've gotten there, you can see that it's starting to look like a plan. I could spend some more time working on the outside, deleting a few extra pieces, etc. That line needs to go away. I probably need to add a line that goes from here kind of across to there. That represents the end of that wall because it doesn't go all the way. And then I could delete these pieces there and there as well. So there's some finesse work to happen. And I can spend the time working through that. Likewise, these contours went through where the pool was. So I probably should cause those to stop. In this case, it's best to add an anchor point where that intersection happens. And then you can get rid of the line segment that's over here. So that it stops at the pool rather than continuing on. So like I said, there's little things to make corrections, but you guys don't need to sit here and watch me make those corrections. I'll press Control 0, and we can see the bulk of the floor plan already starting to take shape. So at this point, it's time to go back to that Rhino model and create the clay renderings of my view. So if I went to the floor plan view here, and I created a rendering of this, unfortunately, the rendering would show the whole roof. Likewise, if I did my ST view sections and I showed the section in floor plan, let me go ahead and there it is. If I did this, I'm missing this part of the terrain, which is a problem. And ultimately, V-Ray doesn't recognize the section tools either. So I'd end up with seeing the roof, etc. So none of it's really working. So I have to do some modifications in order to make it work. We'll leave this one. Let me ST clear all views. There we go. I'm going to work in render 2 so you can see this a little bit better here. First thing that I need to do is explode all the blocks that are in my scene. So I'll go ahead and type SEL block instance, and then I'll type explode. There it is. I'll hit escape twice. SEL block instance, explode. Hit escape twice. SEL block instance, explode. Those are all nested blocks. SEL block instance, nothing. Perfect. I made it all the way. Now, just like we did back when we cut the section of our drawing, or of our building, I'm going to turn back on my big plane and use that to split everything in the scene. So I'm going to select everything, Control A, except for that big plane, and I'll type split. My cutting objects will be that big plane, and we'll go ahead and hit enter. It's normal to see some split failed because not every object fully intersects that plane. I did explode all my blocks. Otherwise, you might see some split failed because of the blocks. So first thing I did was explode all the blocks so that it's ready. So give it a little bit to finish this split. OK, so my split finished now. And now I really have two kind of options that I can work with. So let me go ahead and turn off that big plane. There it is. And as I look in the side view, so let me switch this view into, it doesn't matter whether it's right or front, etc. As I look at this, I can select the top separate from the bottom. And so when I select everything on the top of the building here, let's make sure I get everything like that. There it is. I've selected everything. The simplest solution would be to deselect the terrain and then go ahead and just hide. I'll type hide, and that lets me see into my building, and we'd see the whole terrain, and I could do a clay render of that. The problem is, this is kind of like what SketchUp does when you create a section, is that it lets light flood into your building. So it's not really the best solution, but it's an easy solution. So you could do this, load up the clay rendering VisOpt, and go for it. If I want to be more precise, if I want to see how light enters my building and how the full shadow of the building is cast on the ground, I'm going to take a little bit more time as I start to set this up. So let me go ahead and go back to show so I see everything. And I'm going to reselect everything in my building like that, except for the terrain. So I'm going to hold down Control and deselect the terrain, but I'll select everything in my building. Then I need to go over and deselect anything that is glass. So this should look somewhat familiar here because we did this as part of that section. So down here at the bottom here, I'm going to turn off anything with glass in it. So I'll turn off the glass railing. I'll turn off the window glass and this window glass there as well. So I've turned off all the glass. And then I'm going to go into my V-Ray materials, and I'm going to use that see-through material that we used before, because it's going to block light but be invisible. So it's not a real material, it's a pretend material. So I need to load that up. It's available on the course website or in the package of materials that you guys downloaded. I'll go into load material. There is also, I should point out, a tutorial for how to create the material from scratch if you wanted to. I'm going to go into V-Ray, and then Materials. It's under Special Materials, and there it is, See-Through. And we'll go ahead and load up that see-through material. Perfect. So with the see-through material loaded up, I'm going to right-click on See-Through and say Apply Material to Selection. So it's going to be applied to everything except the terrain, the upper part of the terrain, and the glass. So we'll apply material to selection. There it is. So now I need to go ahead and select everything on the bottom of this selection. So I'm going to come down here and select everything up to the section like that. It should be everything. I'm going to deselect the top just so that we can see it. Oh, I selected too much. I went too high on my selection group. There you go. I've selected everything. You might have to zoom in a little bit to make sure that you get absolutely everything. Oops. There's me working in Adobe. I held down spacebar. Oops. Try that selection one more time. All right, there we go. Now I got everything. So all of this plus the terrain up top, so let me hold down Shift and add to that. I need to create a material that's just kind of a plain white, which is essentially a clay material. So I'm going to right-click and say Create Material Standard. We'll rename this material to be clay. Okay? And so this material is either going to be a very light gray or white, depending. I'm going to try it with white. We may have to make that modification later on. And I'll go ahead and I'll say OK. So now everything that is visible in the scene is now white. Sorry, I have to right-click and say Apply Material to Selection. There it is. So the upper part of the building is see-through. The lower part of the building and all the terrain is white. The last piece to deal with is the glass. So I'm going to turn back on the glass, and as I turn it back on, I'm going to right-click and say Select Objects. Select Objects. And Select Objects. There we go, so that I get all of it. And I have to treat the glass a little bit differently, top and bottom. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to treat them differently because it can be transparent because we're looking down on the glass, so it really doesn't matter. So I'll go ahead and create just a plain transparent material. I'll right-click and say Create Material, Standard. We can call this one Transparent. And I'll say OK. And I'm going to change the transparency value of this material to white from black. And if I were to preview it, this is just perfectly transparent, as if nothing's there. I'll go ahead and right-click on Transparent and say Apply Material to Selection. And that's going to apply it to all of the glass as a whole. Down here in the lower half, if I really was concerned with making it look like the glass, or there was some reason where I had something that was like a skylight or where I could actually tell what it was, you may change the treatment on the top half of the section versus the bottom half of the section. It's kind of specific. OK, so I've gone ahead and I've selected it all. The one last thing that I'm going to double check is, let me hold down Escape twice. I'm going to check up here on my Plan Fill. I'm going to select those objects and make sure that they have that clay material applied to them as well. The reason that I'm selecting them separately is because when I selected what's above and what's below, I never actually selected them. So I'll go ahead and make sure that that has the clay applied to it as well. So Apply Material to Selection. There we go. So it took a lot of work to get there. But now, if I go back to my Set View and I went to Floor Plan, there it is. I can type ST clear all views so I'm seeing everything. But I've already done my fixing with the materials here. And at this point, I can go ahead and I can perform the rendering. So I'll go into my V-Ray options. I haven't, this time, preloaded the clay rendering visopt file. So this is my standard options just as it was before. I just modified the materials. My size and everything should already be set. So I'm ready to do my render. At this point, I'll go ahead and do a test render. So let me drop the size down. Oops. Just to make sure that it's OK first. So that's obviously not what I wanted to see. Oh, yeah, it's not so bad. I had Z depth on. There it is. So if we look at it, OK, I'm getting shadows and whatever. It's time to do that as a higher quality render. So I'll go ahead and bump up the rendering. So let's do that at and I'll go ahead and render this a little bit larger. So remember that the clay rendering is not about the materials anymore. It's about just getting basic shadows as background for your line drawings. And so in this scenario, it's doing a pretty good job. It's casting shadows on the ground up here as if the whole building were there. I can see the top. I can see my little railings there. So everything is casting appropriately the way it should. The lights inside my building, I had that whole set of lights that were lighting up the stairs. Those are still on. I'm seeing those lights. The light that's being cast by the sun is coming through the windows as if the upper half of the building is still there. So that's good as well. So I'm really getting a very accurate view of what the inside of my building is looking like in terms of light settings and how the daylight's entering the space. So we'll let it finish up here. Great. So I have this finished up now. And at this point, I can go ahead. Whoops, there it is. Now it's finished. I can go ahead and save this as the clay render So I'll go ahead and save. I only need the actual black and white version, the RGB color, because I don't need all of the rest of my channels. It's just a one-off clay rendering. So I'll click on Save Image. Let me add it to today's folder here. Floor plan 01 clay. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. Now in this particular example, the interior is kind of a clayish color and the exterior is pure white. That may be something that you want to adjust, at least make it black and white. That's an adjustment that you can make in Photoshop. I'm not going to do it right now because I want to keep moving forward so that you guys can see this line up. But in some cases, you may find that you want to make it a true black and white image so that you're not getting the clayish color, the brownish tone, which is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back over into Illustrator. There's my Illustrator file. At this point, I'll create a new layer. It's going to be at the bottom of everything, and we'll call this clay render. There we go. With it selected, I'll go over to File and then Place, and I'll drop in that clay rendering that I just created. And there it is. And it should match up with the viewport that I created, which it's conveniently not doing. The reason it's not doing it is because I adjusted the, well, it still should have. I adjusted this. I had opened up my layers palette, which messed it up a little bit. So let me just go back to here and let me make sure that the height is set correctly, and it still should line up. Let me adjust the height. I'm holding down Shift to keep it in proportion to make sure it lines up right with the bottom. There it is. And then I'll move it over. Move it back. There it is. Sometimes you have to fine-tune it with the arrow keys just a little bit to make sure it is perfect. And there it is. So it lines up. So that gives me just a little bit of shadow as part of it. Now in this particular scenario, I think the shadow is too dark. It's giving me too much context. So I might take the clay rendering itself here and I might adjust the opacity of it. So I might drop that opacity down. And my settings are going to be different than your settings. This actually looks pretty good in my version. Up there on the screen, you guys don't see enough of it. So you're going to adjust it for whatever feels about right for your particular drawing. So when that's done and it's set the way you want it to be, this is now your plan view of your drawing. It is to scale, so it's something you can put on a drawing and use. And so that's the big goal today, is to be able to get that out. So it's a lot like last class when we did the elevation view. The difference here is that we're doing a plan view which involves the section cut. If you end up deciding to do it the SketchUp way, where you don't worry about the upper half of the building and you just load the clay rendering visop file, I get it. Sometimes with time, that's the only solution. This is just the ideal solution. The reason it's so ideal is that we're getting, sorry, Control plus, there we go. Come on, zoom in. Oh, I haven't. There we go. Is that we're getting what the shadows actually look like as they enter the building and the space, instead of as if the building were cut off. So it's a little bit more accurate to what's happening on the inside of the building. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, you could take a, yeah, I'm only, like the elevation view, it's one elevation. You pick whatever elevation you want. Plan view, you pick, if you have multiple stories, you take whatever plan you want out of it, and that's okay. Okay, so next class, we're going to do the last of these views, which will be the section view. So we'll cut the section view of our building. It's essentially identical to what I just did. The difference is just that it's vertical instead of horizontal. And we'll go through that whole process one more time. Okay? Are there any questions before I turn you guys loose today? I know you have a lot to do. I know you're all working on different things. The ideal world is that you work on the section today. If you haven't done the elevation view from last class, if you missed last class, do the elevation view first, because it'll make a lot more sense. So go back, watch the video, go back, do the step-by-steps to get the elevation view out, and then you can come back and do the section or the plan view, because it takes a little bit more to do it. Remember, as part of your final, you need to pick 2 of the 3 drawings. So elevation and plan, elevation and section, plan and section, whatever your combination needs to be, but it's 2 of those 3. All right? Okay, I'll let you guys start working.